Allison today.
Okay, good morning all. It is 10:10 and we are calling the Citizens Oversight Committee meeting, special meeting to order. And I will go to roll call. Kingston Cole, you're present.
I'm here, present.
You're there. Stephen Keys,
Here.
Lucy Dilworth,
Here.
Rebecca Suggs,
Here.
Pat Randolph,
Here.
Larry Chu,
Here.
Carolyn Longstreth,
Hi, yes, I'm here.
and Max is not here.
And Larry is here.
I kind of said myself. Thank you. And then agenda adjustments. At this time, would anyone suggest adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to open time for public expression. We have an attendee, and let's see if there's any public expression at this time. And if you're interested, raise your hand.
I'm not
Seeing
seeing
none?
any raised hands.
Seeing none, we will continue to move on. Item 5 is approved draft Citizens Oversight Committee bylaws. And with that, Lucy, why don't I turn it over to you?
Okay. Thank you, Larry.
Sure.
When we last met, we spent our time discussing two different versions of a particular subsection of Article 4. In general, the tenor of our discussion was based on, well, actually what happened is we hadn't fully taken on board the information that we received from the MWPA legal counsel, Megan, who's here with us today, that the board of directors does not have the authority to approve the COC's bylaws. And that's significant because our discussion last time was spent looking at particular words and language that we thought would be acceptable to the board, so that we didn't have to get into any kind of fight or conflict. I think what we've done now is the bylaws subcommittee met, and fundamental to our discussion and our thinking was that we not needing board approval is very significant, that we can establish the COC's independence and provide us with the authority to define how we carry out our responsibilities within the constraints of Measure C, the tax ordinance, and the JPA formation agreement. Those two documents are what we're referring to in the bylaws as the agency's, the committee's founding documents. That becomes a defined term, and we've added that to the bylaws. The biggest changes, just to give you an overview, the biggest changes are to add founding documents to the bylaws. This gives us the leash. We're now freer to establish what we want to do, but we obviously we're tethered to the founding documents, which keeps us within the constraints that are set up by the whole agency. But it does allow us to define our own role a little bit more. So the biggest changes are to the language of Bylaws Article 4, subsection 5, which is the one we were talking about last time, but it's actually now become subsection 6, that we will attend meetings of the MWPA and that we're permitted to address the members of these bodies. The other changes, in order to respond to some of the concerns expressed by members of the COC, we've increased the minimum terms to allow more time to those who might draw a shorter term in the lottery. And then a minutes section has been added, which we didn't have before. Just to give you the background, the bylaws committee redrafted the bylaws. We submitted it to Megan for her review. And then after a discussion with Megan, we've come up with this version, and I think everybody is now comfortable with the way this is going. But let's go through and I can talk you through the article changes as they've come up. So I hope that you've got a copy of the bylaws in front of you, but just to begin, the Article 1, the name, this section was really just changed to get us the definition of founding documents in there to refer to both the JPA agreement and the Measure C tax ordinance, so that we've got them both in there. Article 2 is largely the same, except that we've got it. We cite the proper sections of the tax ordinance and the JPA agreement, which is where we got the language to define our purpose. Article 3 is substantively hardly changed, except that it's been rearranged. We took the language from the JPA agreement wholesale and just dropped it in to make sure there weren't any differences. So it's in slightly different order, but that's essentially the same. This is the section that defines who the committee will consist of, what groups and where they're selected from.
Lucy, can I interrupt real quick? I'm sorry. On Article 2, a slight typo.
Yes. Is that adopt right? Is that
Yep.
what? Yeah,
Yep.
I had
Okay.
spotted that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I thank you. I was actually going to bring that up. I forgot.
And Lucy, may I
Has
ask,
that been fixed or what?
We'll need to fix, if we adopt the bylaws, we'll need to suggest that they be adopted with typos fixed. Would that be the way it would get done, Megan?
Yeah, and if they're minimal like that, we would just specify that it would say adopt rather than write, so that it'd be clear which correction was.
Okay.
Okay.
Lucy, I was just curious as to the thinking of the rearrangement on Article 3. What was the thinking there for rearranging it?
I think the way we'd done it was that we'd sort of paraphrased what was in that in the JPA agreement, and it just seemed tidier that to just make sure that there are no inconsistencies, to take the language from that and just put it wholesale into this. And then in the same section, we changed the date when the initial terms begin to 2022 from 2021. Now, somebody, a member of the public who is not able to join us today has mentioned, brought up an issue. It says in here that 3 members of the committee shall be replaced every year, and he points out that if there's a possibility that somebody might get reappointed, maybe the language shall should be changed.
I was wondering about that too.
Yes, Megan, how would that be handled?
You could just specify either, comma, unless any of the members are reappointed, or I guess you could change it to may, unless if you really wanted it to be looser.
Or could you say up to 3 members, maybe? And that way you've left a qualifier in there where it doesn't necessarily have to be 3.
Or
Yeah, I think that's-
3 members' terms will end each year.
Oh, that might be a good approach, actually. Yeah, and then it would be clear that the next terms would be beginning.
Yeah, 3 members of the committee, 3 members' terms will end at the
Right,
will
will end each year.
each year. Okay.
Very simple.
On December 31st, or,
And
want to get specific.
on December
Or just end of term.
on December 31st of each year.
Yeah, I don't know if you need to
Or
specify.
shall be terminated, you can say that.
Excuse me?
Shall be terminated every year.
Okay, so let's just pick something, and so we can, if we like this language, we can go with it. 3 members' terms will end on December 31st of each year. That's what I think might cover that.
How about
Yeah.
the terms of 3 members? It's a little less, maybe a little smoother.
The terms of 3 members will end on December 31st of each year,
Right.
except
And-
except the year 2021.
I would hope we would discuss that again.
Well, I would hope we can get this with, if we could get these, well, approved, we could get the language. Do you have a problem with the terms of three members will end on the 31st of each year? And then do we
No.
need to say except 2021?
Yeah, that's
Or
the
you
part
can,
that I would hope we could discuss. Yeah, because it was 2021.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, now it's 2022.
Yes, exactly. So I understand the reasoning of not wanting any terms to be too short, but then don't the terms of those who are, don't turn over for another 3 years, it'll be basically 4 years. And some people might think that's, not in keeping with the idea of term limits, or that it should turn over more. I did have a thought. Could we possibly compromise and say June 1st? So that way, we don't have as short a term, but, it's not, the difference isn't as great. I don't know. I really don't care for this postponement of the beginning of our terms.
One thought on the June 1st idea, I would say, for there being a switchover, is that may be tricky in terms of your obligation to review the financial information and to come up with a report. That seems sort of like a key moment
Yeah,
in time, and so
good.
to throw new people onto that job might be
Yeah,
tough.
yeah, no, that's a good point.
You know, I had already made a suggestion before, and that was to make the first group 4 years. And that way you can start in 2021, and it also eliminates the concern of some committee members as well as members of the public that the turnover of the first set of COC members may not occur until into the 8th year of a 10-year program. Now, I expect the program to go more than 10 years, but it's easy to address. I mean, even if you were to give me a 1-year term, if you think I'm doing okay, you're going to reappoint me for another 3 anyway. And if I'm going off the rails, then why not get rid of me sooner than later? But I don't see any concern about even the first group of people having a 1-year term starting January 2021. But you can always lock it in by saying that first group gets a 4-year single term.
I think that's along my suggestions too, is to do, everyone has their 3-year term first, and then we go to the staggered terms in the second phase. So that way you have continuity. That was.
I think Larry's suggestion worked. Whoever gets the short stick for the short term at least has got 4 years for the first one, and then the second one might end up having only 5 years instead of 6, but that's a good long time.
Just to the concept behind this was for us to have shorter terms so that it was to encourage turnover, that it doesn't become sort of an entrenched institution with the same people for years and years and years. Of course, that we did provide for reappointment, so in that sense there will be some continuity for a very long time. The idea of 2022 was the compromise, that we would still have these staggered terms, and that, but we would ensure that nobody was leaving after 1 year. That was just simply too short.
I don't see where there's a compromise or even the necessity for one.
That's
Because
for
if you allow for the people with a one-year term to automatically get a second year, you're going to guarantee them 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. With the current language, it does that, right, Larry? Is that what you mean?
No, I had written it differently originally, and I don't have those notes in front of me. But basically, um, when there was a discussion about, not a discussion, but the way it was written had it so that, there'd be 3 board members that had a 1-year term, 3 board members with a 2-year term, and 3 board members with a 3-year term. Just go 2, 3, and 4, and then say that the 4-year term only has 1 term.
That's seemingly more complicated.
It is, but then the other way to do it is to just not put anything in other than the first set of terms and revise the bylaws in 3 years. So that there's no exceptions. It's just pure and simple. You already have people on a staggered 3-year term, and that's just what it is.
I think that this is a reasonable way to deal with this. It builds in so we don't have to amend. It's generally done in bylaws that you set it up as to how you plan to proceed, at least on this topic, obviously.
Well, let me ask a different question. If anybody were to draw a 1-year term, would they feel concerned that they would not get the second term?
We don't know how they behave. They might.
Who knows?
That's
Right.
why I'm wondering whether there's even a necessity to have all these exceptions and to keep it with 2021, so it removes any public or committee concerns that we're extending the tenure of the first set of COC members to be too long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're suggesting return it to 2021.
Yeah, and just leave
Well,
the language the same.
Anybody who ends up with the shortest term can still stand for another term.
Yes. And
So
if you need a
maybe it's not
volunteer-
really a big concern. If somebody has got other commitments, has to move on, so be it.
And if you need a volunteer, I'll take a 1-year term. I always said after public life that I would work on projects with discrete beginning, middle, and end to it.
God bless you, Larry.
I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry. Sorry to miss a joke.
It wasn't so much a joke. I just said, if you need volunteers, I'll take a 1-year term.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm interested too. And there is something in there about volunteering. So yeah, I think you have a good point, Larry. If anybody feels that it's too short, they can stand for another term.
Okay, so it's the consensus that we return it to 2021.
Yeah.
All right. Does any concerns? All right. So now we move on to the Article 4 members' responsibilities section. Stephen, did you have an?
No.
Okay. So number 1 is attend committee meetings. That's the same. Serve on subcommittees of the committee. Same. The next
Not changing anything.
version, right? Not changing. The next 3 and 4 are actually what were our old 3 that's essentially been split up and made clearer. So 1 is the annual review of the report from the MWPA's treasurer, and the other one is the review of the previous year's work plan, financial audit, and supporting documentation as needed, which is a good addition from Megan. And then adopt a report. By the way, the same member of the public who spotted the typo and about the replacement every year for the member's term has also wants us to add write and adopt a report to provide, which I think is perfectly fine if everybody else agrees.
Mm-hmm.
Write
Sure.
and adopt a report to provide feedback.
And does that describe what we actually will be doing? Writing and adopting?
I think the adopt is oddly redundant. If we write a
Oddly.
report and we approve it, then it's sort of, but nonetheless, that's the language from the JPA agreement. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
and then here we come to number 6, which, as you know, we've last spent a lot of time picking out words and choosing from 2 alternatives. We've ended up with the first alternative, which was the language of attend, but with some changes. So we've got attend public meetings of the MWPA's Board of Directors, Operations Committee, Advisory Technical Committee, and we took out partnership entities because Megan felt that we were stepping beyond what the language in our authorizing in our founding documents permitted, and that since there was no formal arrangement with any other entity, we were reaching beyond our purview, which is the MWPA. I think what we would be doing is looking at the MWPA's work, whatever the source, and we would be, at that point, before approvals take place, that would be the point at which we could raise any concerns that we might have. So we took out partnership entities, and each of these bodies standing subcommittees, which and by the yes, these are all the Brown Act meetings. These are not going to be the working group subcommittee meetings, ad hoc subcommittee meetings. And then here comes the language that's different. As observers assigned to the committee, we took out non-voting representatives, and observers gives us the status that makes it clear that we're there to look out for. We're not speaking as the COC at that moment. We're simply looking at what's going on. And then we have the language to address matters relating to expenditure and work plans. And the word address, by the way, has got the meaning that we'll either be focusing on and, if necessary, speaking. Matters relating to expenditure, work plans, and to assess ongoing alignment of expenditures and work plans with the founding documents. So we come back to the founding documents there. We changed the language to assess instead of ensure, because I think assess is a fairer version of what we would be doing. This seems to be the compromise that everybody can live with.
And Lucy, if I can clarify also, it's just the address pieces. It's consistent with the Brown Act that the public may address. So it doesn't add a special panelist position or anything that was concerning to me. So I think it was understood that you would be addressing during public comment, unless at some point in the future there's an option for the COC to have sort of a special place on the agenda. But for item by item, you would have that opportunity to address as any member of the public would.
Yes, although we are currently contemplating the adoption, this has been suggested by the MWPA, because we would like to have more than simple public participation, which does not permit back and forth. I mean, it can permit back and forth, but in fact, it's not something that, if we're seeking clarification, if we're asking a question, it makes it cumbersome for them to say, in fact, they can say, well, we don't address this. So the role as we envision it is that if we have a question or a concern, we can raise it. And the ideal situation would be for the response from the committee that we're sitting in on to say, oh, that's not a concern because of X, Y, and Z, which would completely settle the matter. I mean, as far as being on the public record, and nothing. If the response was not clear or didn't seem to settle the matter, the observer would then bring the concept or the concern back to the full COC for deliberation, and if necessary, that might settle it. But it might not be a concern. But then if it remains a concern, then the COC can take formal action in a manner as yet to be determined. So this is the concept behind what we're trying to do. So although the language allows us to address, and it's very non-specific, we have, for right now, established a process we're hoping hasn't been finalized yet, to have us as an agendaed item on the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee. And because we've been invited, possibly the Operations Committee, but none of this has been finalized or formalized. So, but this would allow us a way around simply being members of the public. And if that doesn't work, we can put down our thinking caps and try again, and if necessary, amend the bylaws or see where we go with that. So, all right, so moving on.
I have one question on number 6. Why is the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee left off?
Because they're included as the standing subcommittees. So, and each of these bodies standing subcommittees.
Okay, I guess I'm a little confused. I didn't realize that they were standing subcommittees.
Yeah, they are standing subcommittees of the board.
Gotcha. Okay.
Both of those were actually created by the board's bylaws, so they're listed in those as a specifically.
Understand. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Carolyn has a question.
Yeah, thanks. I don't see the raised hand feature once again, but Lucy, I'm a little confused. I'm hearing both that the word address is broader than, speaking up as during the public comment, but also that we're going to observe, and if we have an issue, if something comes up, we're going to bring it back to the committee. Which is it? I don't follow.
A discussion takes place, a project is described. It seems to the person who's there as an observer that it might be beyond the Measure C language, that it might be spending money in a way that isn't quite right. That person raises the issue and said, does it seem, I have a concern that this is whatever, or I have a question as to whether this is, and the idea would be hopefully that the committee can respond and say, no, I think this is, we're seeing it this way and whatever, at which point the observer might well be satisfied. They might say, oh, I didn't realize that, or, that does address my concern. At which point I think there's nothing further to be done, unless of course somebody else watching it as in a recording or something wants to, but then that would be an automatic bring it up with the COC. But for that observer, if they're satisfied, I think they would then let the matter go. If they're not satisfied, and they would then, our guess is, and this, by the way, is none of this has been formalized, would then be probably to write a letter or ask Mark or some using informal channels to say, maybe I got it wrong, but I'm still a little uncomfortable with this. If that doesn't solve it, then you bring it up with the full COC and say, this came up in this meeting. They addressed it with us. I'm not sure that it really settled the issue for me.
Right.
We'll think.
But so what I hear you saying is it would be during the discussion of the committee, not ours, but one of the committees that we're observing. And I'm wondering, would we be recognized outside the public comment period?
Well, that's what we were discussing as the compromise. It's not in here, but
I mean, honestly, I'm okay with the word address, but
okay.
There is a little ambiguity there. Maybe we just finesse it and don't worry about it. We'll see what happens.
I think that's the plan, is to leave it broad and then pin it all down in our policies and procedures. So we would get a protocol set up as to how it was done, something that the board can live with, something that we can live with, where we've given the opportunity to have some kind of dialogue, and then then the COC takes action, but at a whole step back if the matter isn't resolved. So this is the compromise. I think that everybody feels that it allows us enough room to speak if we need to, but obviously there's absolutely no compulsion or requirement that anybody speak. In fact, it's anticipated that on most meetings we would have nothing to say.
Right.
Just, in
Which has actually happened. I think through all these meetings, Carolyn, I think you're the only one that has asked a question in any of the committee or subcommittee meetings that I've attended. So mostly we're just observers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next item was something that we'd taken out, but we've reintroduced it, which is to monitor the deliberations of the MWPA's Board of Directors Operations Committee, Advisory Technical Committee. I would like to add in there, and their standing committees, because that's what we do monitor.
Okay.
Um,
I'm not sure how 6 and 7 are so much different from one another, though.
Because the number 7 introduces the word transparency. So, and that gives us an opportunity to comment on issues that we feel maybe not as transparent as they should be. It's functionally the same except for the word transparency.
Could we not combine the number 6 and 7?
But we just,
I'm only asking. I'm not
for complexity,
just for simplicity.
Yes, for simplicity's sake, it seemed better to break it out. And 6 is kind of thick. Oh, one other matter to address when we're talking about using the word attend public meetings. Attend doesn't prohibit us from speaking, as perhaps Monis might have, but the other meaning of attend is that we literally attend as opposed to just watching recordings. This is something that we feel strongly that people should be there.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good point.
And I know that Mark brought up in the executive committee meeting that we probably will be going fairly soon to real meetings. Mark has secured locations, and when things are in person, I think it benefits us to actually attend, to be seen, to be there. And Lucy and I chatted, one of the things that happens when you attend meetings is you see who else is there.
Yes,
and that has some real value too, knowing who else is at meetings. So I would hope that when we have in-person meetings again, that we will be attending them, albeit sitting in the back of the room, perhaps observing, but have our presence be there.
Could we have little hats that say COC?
Yeah, we can have sweatshirts that say
Good
COC.
idea. Sweatshirt.
If I could just add one thing too about number 7 with the transparency language, I think it's helpful to keep it separate for another reason, which is that the transparency sort of monitoring isn't part of the JPA language explicitly and isn't really a defined task associated with the review of the financial reports and that type of thing. So it may be that though the board isn't required to formally approve the bylaws, they will be acknowledging them, which is sort of, they'll have them on their agenda, they'll have a look at them. And if there is concern about that sort of being beyond the reach of what was contemplated by the JPA language, sort of this transparency piece being beyond what their intent had been, then the board could say, we don't feel comfortable with this one. We recommend that you pull this from your bylaws because it does go beyond. So keeping it separate would allow for that to be reviewed sort of independently and if necessary, taken out at some point.
So I would add that I think that transparency is implicit in our role, as it might not be specified in the founding documents, but that is, as representatives of the public, it is one of the concerns that we would naturally have.
Yeah, certainly.
Agreed. I don't think it's a far reach to say that that would be what part of your duties would be, but I just, in the event that the board really wants to tighten it around the financial review, I just think that keeping it in its own under its own bullet point will allow for some more conversation and ease of change if need be.
Okay, so conduct of members, Article 5, no change. Article 6 has been expanded to include a section on minutes.
Lucy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's talk about item 8 real quick
Item,
of Article 4.
oh yes, so the language here was changed to make it clear that we might evaluate, select, but we can only recommend to the board any candidate, and that any candidate must be appointed by the board. So that completely takes it. This is an area where the board does have final say. I'm assuming that it'll be kind of helpful to the board if we can do some winnowing of applications, and so that they'd be comfortable with it. Obviously, if they don't like any of our candidates, they can appoint somebody else. But this is the making,
or suggest appointment back to us.
Yeah. And then perform such other duties as may be directed by action of the committee consistent with the founding documents. So once again, we bring up the founding documents just to sort of establish any limits.
Right.
Then in Article 5, conduct of members, no change.
Right.
Article 6, meetings, and a section on minutes has been added. Article 7, officers, no change. Article 8, subcommittees, it's been minorly rewritten to include a reference to the Brown Act, so that we make sure that however we do it in accordance with the provisions of the Brown Act. It's just one sentence. Article 9, conduct of business. This is the same. So wait, just as a quick reference, when we talked about actions of the committee shall be approved by a majority vote of the members present, with 2 exceptions. Any action to amend these bylaws requires a majority vote of the full committee. Right. So just that will require Max to be here.
Right.
Just to make that clear. All right.
Or does it mean that it's, or does it mean that it's it has to be 5 instead of, let's say there were 7 people attending and a majority would be 4?
No,
that was how I had read it when, just because generally for something where in this type of language gets used with adoption of ordinances or resolutions, more formal actions that require a majority vote of the full board or of a full committee, where other actions can just require the majority of a quorum. So I thought that I didn't realize it would require full attendance. So given that I was a little confused, if you mean for full attendance, we should include something about that, I would guess.
So vote of the full committee isn't sufficient. Do you think we could, how would we rephrase that?
It would have to be something about all committee members present and voting, or something along those lines, so that it's clear that the full committee is present and participating in the vote, or must be present and participating in the vote.
Well, we could do what we've said in the next one. Any action to remove a member from office requires a supermajority of 6 out of 9 votes. So we could say a majority vote of 5 out of 9 votes for the bylaws amendment. Would that work?
Do we want to do that in the rules committee, or do we want to do it here in the bylaws?
Usually this sort of thing is in the bylaws. Not a catastrophe if we moved it. I think if we just solve it by saying a majority vote of 5 out of 9 votes, and then any action to remove a member requires a supermajority of 6 out of 9 votes. Then we've got parallel construction.
So the point is that we don't need a full committee to vote on the bylaws.
No, we do need a full committee to vote on the bylaws.
Oh.
Unless, I'm assuming that's if anybody wants to be less, I just assume that bylaws are sort of so significant that a full committee is required, the full 9.
But this isn't what that says.
Right, I was just gonna say, you would have to actually specify that with the full committee present. Somehow you need to indicate that everyone has to be there, because 5 votes could still happen even if only.
5 out of 9. It does say 5 out of 9.
Right, but I would of 9 members present, or of the full
9.
board being present, somehow indicated, if that's your intent, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
9 members.
And is that the intent? Is that what we are saying we want, or is that what?
It's up to you guys. If you feel it can go with less, that's fine. Stephen.
Well, for bylaws, it would seem you want the whole committee there. It's not going to happen very often. It's going to be a rare thing probably. And so it would make a lot of sense that you want the entire committee present.
It may be rare, but it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
That's exactly the problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's rare. And this is one of the situations where it's happening.
And then Larry, are you saying that we cannot take action because Max is not here?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting how we should write the bylaws.
Mhm.
Yeah, but if you want full participation, we cannot take action today.
Right. Well, that that would be sort of but it would seem to make sense that anytime you're doing something in the bylaws, you do want the entire committee present.
Okay.
And he may show up at any minute. It's almost 11.
Why?
Unless you take amendment to be literal,
It
because we're
seems
not
like he
amending
went
the
and did
bylaws.
something else this morning, probably forgot. So
Because it's so important, Kingston, because it's such a major thing. That's why I'm suggesting you probably do want everyone there. And for
We're
the
making it a super majority of the committee, that's all. 6 votes. And that's important, make it for 6 votes for both, for removal as well as adoption. Okay.
yeah, I was comfortable with the 5 votes as long as it was a majority, but
I
I'll
think
go
we
with
have-
whatever.
But you said it was important, more important than that, so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good with whatever the committee wants to do here.
But you have 2 issues here you're grappling with. The question, there's one of attendance, which is different than the number of votes you need in order to pass it.
Yeah.
If you want a super majority to pass it, then it doesn't matter the number of people you have in attendance, as long as you have 6 there and they unanimously agree.
Right.
Right.
If you want everybody to have a say in this, then it's that first condition should be not about voting, but about having everyone present.
Right.
So
Which is-
Larry, too, what happens if one of us on the way to the meeting get into an accident and we cannot be present? Does that mean that everything has to stop, or can we continue to conduct business?
You could have that discussion like we're having now, but if you want everyone present and voting on it, we could not take action today. Unless you take that literally where it says amended, because we're not amending the bylaws right now either.
That's true. We're adopting them. That's different.
even more important, perhaps.
Uh,
Well,
The thing is that Max has been part of the committee doing all of these editing. He knows about the current version. He's participated in all the previous discussions. So
Right.
it's not as if this is being sprung on him.
Right.
He knows if something has happened and he simply could not participate. I don't think it's not in this meeting. I don't think it's as if we are freezing him out or acting in bad faith. So my inclination is, what is this, the 4th meeting we've had on the bylaws? Something like that. My suggestion is, let's take action, get it on, moved on down the road. And if he comes back and says, no, I really feel strongly, if he can convince enough of us to agree with him, we'll amend it.
And those of us who are on the subcommittee can tell you that he's in agreement and did the PowerPoint that's not here to show you. So
And in practicality, what would probably happen under bylaws is you'd call an ad hoc subcommittee to look at the bylaws for a change. It would come back to the board, and it may be 2 months before the board even votes on something. So it's not like you're going to have a meeting spring, a new change, a new major change on the bylaws and vote on it right then and there. It's going to be a process no matter what.
Yeah, and if you want to treat it as a public hearing, then it needs 2 readings anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
It
Thank
does.
you. Thank you, Larry.
So are we going to go with any action to amend these bylaws requires a majority vote of 5 out of 9 members present? Now, of course, we could argue that this isn't, as we have, that this isn't an amendment to the bylaws. This is an adoption, and therefore that specification doesn't work. I suggest it's only 4 minutes till 11, and that we could go on, and that if Max joins us, we can return to this.
I mean, when he finally figures out daylight savings time.
Yeah. I'm hoping.
Oh, man.
I have to say, my wife does this to her employees. She never reminds them
Text messages.
on a Saturday that they've got to come early to work, and she lets them figure it out for themselves.
So let's move on and then return to this. If Max joins us, then it's moot anyway.
Right.
Um,
Thank you, Max, for actually making this a practical exercise.
Well, but this is in fact something that's been pointed out. If somebody didn't want a bylaws amendment, by action of one person simply failing to show up, they could prevent any bylaws amendment. That would, of course, contravene our code of conduct as we're going to define it. So I think we could say that it was.
That's a good point.
Captured.
Then we look right. Then it just looks disruptive. Then it allows one member to be disruptive in the group. It's a very good point, Lucy.
Okay. So governing provisions and severability, usually boilerplate, but the difference is that we added in references to the founding documents to make it clear that in the event of any conflict between the founding documents and the bylaws, that the founding documents govern. So it just, once again, it's putting the tether on what we're doing to make sure that we're in compliance with our mandate. And then, once again, we have language, effective date and amendments. These bylaws shall be effective upon their approval by a majority vote of the full committee. So I don't know if we need to change the language here or if we just.
Looks okay to me, unless someone else feels there's a problem.
Right. So in effect, these are now the having had legal review, having had 5. This will be the 4th meeting or the 5th meeting, having had full discussion. Does anybody have any concerns that other than what we've discussed as we went through it?
Yeah, I still have my same concern I've had all along with item number 7, which is splitting terms during the year. I went into this research and I looked all over the place to see if there's any public committees out there anywhere where you have executives or chairs serving 6 months. I could find no examples of it. It's unconventional and unorthodox, and I would really like us, and this is beyond my term. Okay, so I've got to be careful how I'm speaking because it can sound like I'm trying to extend my term. That's not my point, because 10 years down the road, it's going to be someone different. 3 years down the road, next year, it's going to be someone different. I've said from the beginning, I believe in continuity. I think it's really important that you have one chair for the entire cycle and one co-chair for the entire cycle. And I don't see any advantage whatsoever to splitting it for either the agency or for the public. And so that's the one area I'm trying to decide how I want to vote here, whether I vote for this yes, or I vote no, or I vote yes with a qualifier. And so that's where I'm wrestling right now, Lucy, and everyone else on this committee. It's the one area I just don't understand the logic behind a 6-month term. And otherwise, I'm pretty good with this. Yeah.
So does anyone want to address Larry's point?
Well, personally, I don't have an objection to it one way or another. I think if you look at 6 months versus 12 months, and we look at what the duties of the chair are, there's nothing explicit about it other than to facilitate the meetings.
Mhm.
You know, the chair does not have any additional powers or responsibilities beyond any of the other people on the committee. So if the rationale or the preference of those who favor the 6-month term is to allow for a greater opportunity for different committee members to serve as the chair, then it would accomplish that. But
Right.
by and large, I would also agree that a one-year term does provide continuity, but the but there being that we're just facilitating meetings.
So I mean, I think that is the logic, Larry, that that the responsibilities of the chair being limited, then the continuity issue is less complicated.
Okay.
Do others have strong feelings one way or the other?
Doesn't appear to be.
Well, I tend to agree with Larry. But we've hashed it over before, and we haven't made a change.
Right.
So whatever.
No, I think this then does complete the review of the changes and the thinking and where we are.
There's public comment.
So I guess this is up for approval, but whereas there's public comment, obviously, but
We'll get to public comment, but Stephen, you've got your hand raised.
Oh, well, yeah, no, my question is there public comment? Because I've got somebody here who would like to comment.
Yeah, are we ready for public comment, would people say? Folks, public comment? I see no objection. Bruce Bartell would like to speak. Mark, I think you've got control there.
Put it up for me because I don't have a computer going.
You just-
Second, I'm working on that. There we go, Bruce. If you unmute yourself, you're good to
There you
go.
go, Bruce. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Larry made my point, the point I was going to make about with the role of the chair simply be to conduct business, conduct the meeting. There is no issue of continuity. So that should not be an issue. I'd like to make 2 suggested revisions on Article 4. And mostly making them consistent among internally. To provide Article 5, provide feedback to the MWPA's Board of Directors. And I'd like to suggest and to the public, because that's consistent with the previous language under responsibilities of the committee or role of the committee. And number 7, monitor the deliberations of MWPA's Board of Directors, Operations Committee, and so on. I noted that the Finance Committee was out, the Executive Committee was out, and I suggest using the wording from number 6, which covers the standing committees. And that would also, in the eventuality of another standing committee being formed, that would automatically be added. That's it. Thank you.
okay, Bruce, just to respond, we did actually add and their standing committees into that language.
Right.
So that
You did number 6. I didn't see that you did in number 7.
no, we discussed it and we decided that it should be included in number 7 also. So
Thank you.
that's going to be an added provision.
If I may respond to Bruce's remark about and to the public, I think that's part and parcel of who we are anyway, and it may be redundant and not necessary because that's what we do. We're a citizens oversight committee, so we are reporting to the public automatically. What I'm saying is I'm not certain we really need to add that, and I defer to everyone here. And thank you, Bruce, of course.
I think the more we say the public, and the more we talk about transparency, again and again and again, that may be our job, and you may think it's a tacit situation, but for me, the more times we say it, the safer I feel. Okay.
Megan, I think you had a concern about that.
It was only that I believe all the information would be available in publicly noticed meetings, and it would be something that's discussed in the public meeting by the board and by your committee. My only concern was that I don't know whether there was a vision of this being reported out separately by the COC to the public, or whether it would be something presented to the board as part of a public presentation. So it went a little bit beyond when it says adopt a report, and I think it says, I don't know whether it says present it to the board, but to provide feedback to the board. It was just going into another realm of like, what role does the COC in doing have in presenting information to the public? I felt like if you hemmed it into just being provide feedback to the board, that would necessarily, as I think Mr. Mink is, I'm sorry, I may have pronounced your name wrong.
You can say Larry.
Larry had said it's sort of built in, the public process is built in to it being shared with the public, but I don't know whether it would be the role of the COC to sort of present it to the public, would be my only feedback.
Thank you, Megan.
So it looks like Max has, it's not just.
He didn't just oversleep. He disappeared from the COC.
Did we have other public comment? Stephen, did Pamela want to?
Yeah.
No, we do
Hi.
not.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Pamela.
My only concern, I didn't know if the chair helped set your agenda with Mark. That was one question. The second question is, would that 6-month person be able to get a second term in a row? I didn't know if that was going to happen. Being elected for 11 years, I have never, and on many committees in Fairfax, Planning Commission, blah, blah, I've never seen a 6 months.
Yeah.
Ever. And I kind of feel a little bit like turning over and over and over every 6 months. You can try it, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's a little disruptive. I think other people might think differently, but I think as soon as you get a relationship and a style, then you're gone. So that's my little 2 to 3 cents this morning.
It kind of reflects my thinking, is that I've been on committees forever and I've attended. I've never seen it before. Pat, please, you have your hand raised.
I would only say that because we have built into the bylaws that the vice chair succeeds the chair, that we do have this continuity, that if the chair and vice chair are working as a team, that you have the continuity there. And I still support having the 6-month term to, as it's, the position doesn't have beyond a great deal of power to begin with, and to share it out to more people, to me, seems better.
Yeah, Larry, thank you, Pat. Larry, you had your hand raised.
Regarding the comment about the agenda, the chair doesn't even set the agenda. It's not like when we were on the city council and mayor does that with city manager, and I've actually removed stuff from the agenda before, not feeling that it wasn't appropriate for our discussion. But the chair doesn't do that. The committee sets the agenda at the end of each meeting.
Okay, so it's a different.
So really, you're just facilitating meetings, and we're under the construct of the Brown Act, as well as having a use of the Rosenberg Rules of Order. So, whoever's coming in should already be familiar with that prior to it. And, that's why we also built in the automatic succession of the vice chair to be chair. That was the closest thing we needed for continuity. I mean, if Larry Minikis didn't show up for a meeting one day and I had to take and facilitate the meeting, yeah, there may be some stylistic differences, but fundamentally, the meeting would be run the same way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, my sense is that we have met already so many times and will continue to meet and get to know each other that it almost doesn't matter who's running the meeting. This is a largely a collegial body, and nobody's going to have to bang the gavel and tell somebody else to shut up or something like that. So
Right, we've got Mark to do that.
we mute him.
Sorry, Mark.
And he wants to go for a run, everybody, remember?
Yeah, I know. So let's, okay, so shall we go to vote? Is that where
No.
we're at?
We cannot. Right?
Okay,
We need to straighten out the language on whether we all have to be present to vote on the bylaws. I'm satisfied with the way it is now. I don't really see a need to change it.
Okay, well, we could say to amend, but it says these bylaws shall be effective on their approval by a majority vote of the full committee. We could simply take out full and then vote. Because once the bylaws are established, any amendment is going to require 9 votes. But to adopt perhaps in this particular situation where we know Max is in favor, I know this is unorthodox, but Megan,
the other thing we can do is just have an agreement to agree, and that we'll take we'll have a very short section in our normal meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, and we'll just go for vote without discussion at that point, just to formalize what we're doing today. How does that sound? So in essence, we're taking a straw poll here. We know we have the votes to approve, and then we move forward, and with Max present, he'll probably be here next Sunday. With Max present, we'll take the full vote.
Maybe somebody else will be absent next time. Yeah, huh?
Pat has her hand up. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Pat.
I was going to say, this doesn't resolve the question of whether everyone has to be present or not, because as Larry says, maybe somebody else will be absent.
Carolyn.
That I'm beginning to see a slight danger in saying everyone has to be present for action to.
But it feels like something as big as approving bylaws. You really want and it only happens once. You want everyone present, at least for public perception, I would think. I mean, we know it's going to pass. We know where we're going with this. So it's
Take
just
the bird in hand, Larry. The bird
I'm
in
sorry.
hand.
Sorry,
Yeah.
8 out of 9 should work.
So can Mark,
I agree.
Mark can be Max?
We don't have a proxy provision here.
Yeah, but we do have 8 votes out of a full committee of 9. Whether Max is here or not, whether he votes yes or no, we have a majority vote.
So shall we call a vote?
I say yes.
Hold on just a second.
I move that we adopt the bylaws.
Larry was speaking, Kingston. I'm
We
sorry.
haven't addressed Pat's comment yet, and I agree. Are we
Okay.
keeping the language as it exists, or are we going to say that the full committee needs to be present?
I think we just had a consensus that we were not going to do that.
Okay, but that even goes.
That was the way I heard the discussion.
Seems like that.
Yeah, we kind of backed into that for the purpose of approving today.
Megan, what's your advice?
I have not actually seen a requirement to have everyone be present for a vote. Generally, it will say, the language that's already there, which just requires that there be all the majority of the full group. Whether that means that the full group is in attendance or not is sort of an aside. I think it's for the reasons that have been indicated, that there are moments where unanticipated things come up and it won't allow you to be present at the meeting, but it doesn't mean that should necessarily delay your ability to take action. So if there's a concern that somehow you would want to make it more difficult to change the bylaws than it currently is, you could up it to a supermajority to make revisions to those bylaws. But it sounds like a majority was, at least before when it was discussed, it sounded like a majority was the consensus. So I understand the intent is to have everyone part of the discussion, but I don't know that in practice it will be, it may stall things more than you want them to. This is not a legal opinion. This is just from sitting on a lot of city council meetings and watching things happen and how unexpected issues can come up. And right now in the Zoom world, it seems less likely, but once we're back in real attendance, that can also pose some issues if people are traveling and things like that.
So in that case, will we leave the language in conduct of business to simply a majority of the full committee, and then equally the same, the adoption of the bylaws by a majority of the full committee, and then we're there?
Yeah.
Why don't we say the supermajority language?
No, let's leave it majority. Supermajority to remove somebody. I think
Okay.
majority is sufficient.
Okay.
Otherwise, you may never get anything done.
Okay.
Okay, so
Kingston moved, and I presume that it was with the additional wording in a couple of places. And were there any other changes, some typos or something?
I haven't taken notes, and I'm sure Lucy has, but if either, I suggest that either Lucy or I go through our notes and mention what the changes were discussed and agreed upon, and then make that inclusive in the motion rather than having it be an assumption.
Thank you, Mark. That's great.
just make the motion as amended.
Do you want to do that, Mark?
We can't vote today under that.
No, we can't.
No, actually, the way the language is written, you can vote today.
Oh.
Lucy, do you want me to go through my notes, or you want to go through your notes? Either way, it's fine.
Let me get through what I have, and if I've missed something, you
Okay.
can correct me. So Article 2 purpose, we're taking out a typo.
Whoops.
Lucy, you locked up. The other thing that can happen.
Yes, this typically doesn't happen in a public meeting. When
You don't think?
person.
I'm locked up.
Mark, just start running in place, okay?
I will. So
we want to get him out there
as well.
We're tight little circles, right? Okay.
We have to keep Mark healthy.
So I'll pick up.
Lucy's completely.
Yeah, totally.
So Article 2 under purpose will make the change where it says prepare and adopt a report, and remove the word right.
Mm-hmm.
And going down to the last paragraph within Article 3, the 3 members of the committee shall be replaced every year. Instead of saying shall be replaced every year, it was the terms of 3 committee members shall end at the end of the year.
Right.
And then a change from January 1, 2022, change it to January 1, 2021. In Article 4, Section 5, write and adopt a report to provide feedback to the NWPA's Board of Directors. However, I did not hear a consensus to add Bruce's recommendation and to the public. Am I accurate in that there was not consensus on that, or there was consensus on that?
No, I think Megan explained it, that everything that we do has to be public anyhow. So
okay,
that's fine.
Welcome back, Lucy. I picked off where you dropped off.
Good.
back.
Then moving on to Article 7 to add and each of these bodies standing committees
Yes.
to number 7.
Yes.
And because of the legal definition of full committee, the majority vote of full committee does not require full attendance. It just means that it will have to be a vote of 5 and not a majority of the attending members. We do, and based on Megan's legal opinion, we actually don't have to change that, and that allows for a vote today. And so I asked the group if I captured all of the suggestions as we went through the day.
I think so.
Right. I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we
I-
already had public comment, but Bruce has his hand up, and we've been handling public comment quite informally anyways. If the board or the committee is good with it, we can allow Bruce to speak again. Maybe he caught something that we didn't catch, right?
Totally.
That would be like Bruce. So Bruce, please unmute yourself.
Okay, Mark, I didn't hear you cover the changes to Article 4.
That was the write and adopt, and where we the consensus was not to go to and to the public. And then for Section 7 of Article 4, we are adding the and each of these bodies standing committees. Are those the ones, Bruce?
Yes, but you did not cover that in your summary.
I did.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. Yeah.
Maybe I glitched out on you, but yeah, I did cover that.
No, I heard it. I think I did.
Thank you, Bruce.
And just so for my notes, did we end up with the where did we end up on the language for the 3 members and the term
Terms of 3 members shall end at
on the 31st of December,
mhm.
except for 2021?
And then we changed January 1 to 2021 instead of January 1 of 2022.
Oh,
That was the consensus that I heard while we were discussing.
fine, that's right. Good.
All right, we have now, Kingston, you
second.
wanna amend your motion to include what I brought forth.
I so move.
There you go.
I second.
And we have a second.
All right, and then I have Allison's roll call sheet, so I can get a nice accurate accounting. And I'll do a roll call for a yes or a no, please. Kingston,
Yes.
Larry Minikis,
Yes, I already voiced my one qualification to it, but yes.
thank you. Stephen Keese,
Yes.
Lucy Dilworth,
Yes.
Rebecca Suggs,
Yes.
Pat Randolph,
Yes.
Larry Chu,
Aye.
and Carolyn Longstreth.
Yes.
We have 8 votes in favor, 1 absentee.
Okay, mission accomplished.
Thank you, committee. Appreciate it, and everybody.
No kidding.
It was a long process, but I think we've got a good document.
Is there anything else on the agenda?
Here, here.
No, sir.
Just checking.
Number 6. We can
Thank
go
you,
to number
Mark and
6.
staff, too.
All right. Well, in that, unless anyone wants to make any last minute comments, which I believe we've commented ourselves out on a Sunday morning, we can call for adjournment.
I
Official.
will move to adjourn.
Second.
So moved. Folks, enjoy your Sunday.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
All right.
Ciao.
See you at our
Bye.
meeting.
Bye, folks.
Bye.